Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar, 5 Google Ads Tips to get the most out of your budget. We're so excited to have you join us today and hear some expert Google Ads tips. We're also excited because WordStream has partnered with LocalIQ to provide technology-backed marketing services to deliver results-focused results to help local businesses unlock measurable business growth. So without further ado, I'll pass things off to our presenter, Michael.
Hey everybody, hope you're all enjoying your Thursday afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. And it's, of course, fall. I myself am in Massachusetts, so got some foliage around here and definitely starting to feel some of that colder weather come in, but can't complain. It's part of the life of New England. So what I am is I am part of the WordStream team. So WordStream is a part of the Local IQ big picture. But what I am is I am a digital strategist. So I definitely specialize in Google search and display, but I also have some components of pretty much anything else paid ads, and that's what I do for my clients, right? So my book of business are small to medium-sized companies throughout the entire country, including out of country, but it's every single industry that you can possibly imagine. So that makes me unique is I've pretty much seen every circumstance there possibly is with accounts, right? So whether I've seen accounts that are in perfect shape or accounts that are complete messes, it comes down to a science, and there's certain points and tips that can be made amongst any account to help make sure that you truly are getting the most out of your budget. So just a couple of logistics here. So this webinar is going to be recorded. It's recorded right now. You will be able to check your inbox because this is going to be sent to you, I believe, after 48 hours or so. So just keep an eye out for your mail for that. And throughout this webinar, you can submit any of your questions in the chat feature for a Q&A segment at the end of today's webinar. So the 5 tips for Google Ads success. These are the 5 that I'm going to be kind of drilling into today. The first one is going to be leverage your network targeting. Number 2 is implement device, location, and demographic adjustments. Number 3 is understand your spend. Number 4 is utilize the search terms report and a couple updates around it that Google has made recently. And then number 5 is adapt to your business goals. So for each of these points, I'm just going to be talking a little bit what they are, and then a couple points to really hone in on your budgeting and making sure that your budget is where it should be and you're seeing the success that follows. And just a quick disclaimer, I always just like to make this point known and important, is that these recommendations are truly based off of the assumption conversion tracking is accurate, because I'm not here to help you expand just your general reach with broad match keywords, right? I'm here to show you some tips on getting the most out of your budget to follow your actual conversions and leads that you are seeing. So whether or not some of these points apply to your account, they truly are focused on conversion. So just keep that in mind as we go through these. So the first tip that we're going to be talking through is leveraging network targeting. So when you think of the targets that Google basically tries to place your campaigns through, it's the Google search page, search partners, which are going to be websites that allow for Google Ads to take place on them. So those could be anything from YouTube, Amazon, but then it gets a little bit out of sort with New York Times, USA Today, ESPN, any type of website that hosts Google Ads within their search components are going to be places that some of your actual queries could be coming from. And then the display network. So the display network is going to be more for visual ads, right? So it's going to be those little banner ads that you see on various websites that Google just simply is allowed to place ads on because that website is allowing Google to do so. So what's important here is that when you think of purchase intent, truly you more so think of Google search page. I see a lot of clients that have search partners and display connected because that's technically what Google has when you first create a brand new campaign. Display is the easy one that you should always take off because display is meant for visual ads with imagery, right? So technically speaking, if you are interested in the display network, you really should have your own display campaign and make sure that search and display are separated. Search partners is the different component where sometimes I do see good success, but truly, 8 out of 10 accounts that I see, search partners is just not working the way you'd hope, and it can lead to some wasted budget. So just as an example here, when you look at the breakdown, which you can do within the Google native platform, you segment out by network targeting, and you can see here, this particular campaign has all three connected. Most of the spend and most of the actual traffic is going to the search page, but they have search partners and display connected. So if you take a look at that interaction rate, which is your click-through rate, you'll notice that the click-through rate for search is actually 5.8%. Search and display partners are actually significantly lower, which is why the overall click-through rate of this campaign is actually a 0.4. So just by removing search partners and display network, this particular campaign would see a significant increase in click-through rate. All that spend would go towards where they're actually seeing their conversions. And it's just a more well-rounded component of trying to prioritize where your spend is going and making sure that there's not just 300,000 impressions on the display network with a text ad rather than a nice visual ad. But the important thing to really kind of take from this is you always want to check before you're taking action here. Like I said, I have seen some accounts where search partners tends to sometimes get some decent conversions. It just truly depends on the industry and what your campaigns are trying to accomplish. So observing your data from a 90-day window is typically the route that I take. You can, of course, go from a 30 or 45, whatever kind of works better for you. But I would say understanding it first makes the most sense. And outside of that, thinking about the search page, where that's normally where people are going to actually make purchases or find a service company or maintain a lead, you want to put yourself in your user's shoes and be like, okay, well, is this something that I go to Google search for, or something that I would go to ESPN, read about my man Tom Brady leaving for the Bucks, right? So kind of following up with the kind of back-end component of the account would be the device, location, and demographic adjustments. So what Google allows for you to do is put bid adjustments on these different segmentations of your data to always make sure that you're more aggressive and putting your budget where it best belongs. So the first one here is going to be device bid adjustments. So it's important to really understand where your traffic is going. When you segment out your data, you're going to see mobile devices, computer, and desk tablets, right? So when you think of people on their cell phones, people live with their phones these days. It's insane how much usability they truly are. But looking at your data, maybe you're seeing a lot of clicks and spend on mobile, but no conversions. Maybe your conversions are coming from computer, because if you look at this image here, maybe your website really just isn't as friendly on a phone. So people are clicking you because they're interested, but then they're just not really able to find what they're looking for. The other thing to note here, and this actually kind of applies to any of them, will be the incremental adjustments. So what these adjustments are basically doing is telling Google, hey, I'm willing to spend this percentage amount more on my given cost per clicks because I want to get more aggressive, right? But you can actually do these in a positive or a negative manner. So if we look at this example here, I have this one campaign. I broke it out by computer, mobile phones, and tablets, and you're able to see where the conversions are coming from, what the normal cost per clicks are, what the overall costs are, all of this, the more normal metrics that you'd look to kind of understand how it's going. Now, the thing that sticks out to me here is that the average cost per click is higher for computers, but their overall cost per conversion is also almost twice as high as mobile phones. So in this particular instance, I would most likely be making a small, maybe 5% negative bid adjustment on computers, because when I look at this, it's telling me that my budget is best deserving of mobile devices due to the structure of how my data is coming in. So it's a similar concept with location adjustments, right? So there's two components that I'm going to run through. Basically, if you're targeting a certain area, it doesn't necessarily mean you're getting the best results that you could. So if you're targeting the entire United States, how do you know which states or even which neighborhoods are performing better than others without actually looking and understanding that traffic? So location options is kind of a second setting that Google sneaks in there, and it kind of goes off of the first point. So we'll get to that right after. But if you come into your native platform of Google, you break down your actual location data. So you can see here, we're targeting the United States. Rather than looking at it from a country perspective, I broke it down by the state's perspective. So this particular client, just to give you a quick backfill, is in the boating industry, and they're based out of Minnesota. So it has that kind of home body. They want to focus a little bit more attention to their homeland because they're selling boats and there's a lot of lakes. So what we have is a small bid modifier, and it emphasizes where their conversions have been coming from. And it's at 13, but this is also a larger date range. And this is something that we've slowly grown up over time, right? So being able to just simply understand the data that Google is giving you and giving you the chance to actually look at it can help you hone in on different states, whatever you're targeting, neighborhoods, countries, anything, to really make sure that your budget is trying to make more emphasis on these particular areas rather than giving every state the same chance of spending the same amount of money, right? Now, if you were to come in here and you're targeting the United States and you start to find some different areas that are not a part of the United States and you're kind of confused about that, the reason may be for this particular little sneaky setting that Google has at the bottom of your location settings. So if you go to a campaign and you click into settings here and you go to locations, there's this little tiny additional drop down called location options. And the first one is what Google recommends, and it's people in or who show interest in your targeted locations. So if there are people outside of the United States that have an interest in what you're selling, then technically Google is able to serve your ads to them at times. Now, of course, the United States is a big talking point these days with everything going on. So there is going to be a chance that if you were to look at your data and you're not in the second option where it's people that are in and you're preventing those that just have a general interest in the US, then most likely you could see some random queries coming in that don't make as much sense. Same thing goes with demographic adjustments. You can go by age, gender, household income. Maybe you're selling a younger aged product. You don't necessarily want to be spending all your money going towards older demographics or different genders you can take priority for. The one thing I would note with these demographic adjustments is that on the 19th of October, so in 4 days, Google is officially updating their housing, employment, and credit advertising policies to try to prevent discrimination against age, gender, or household income. So you definitely want to Google that, check it out, see if your account fits. If you sell homes, if you're in employment, if you're credit, there are some limitations that are starting to roll out. So you just want to make sure that you don't necessarily get stuck in that kind of dark area. So in terms of takeaways, again, it's important to investigate your data before you make these changes, but open up that data, analyze it, and then add a couple small, 5 to 10% bid modifiers where you're seeing the most success. And the more you're doing so, all you're doing is putting your budget where it best is served, and then the negative bid modifiers prevent the smaller areas. So it all kind of works towards getting the most out of your budget. Outside of that, I would also consider seasonal shifts. If you're open every single month of the year, but you're like me and you're in New England and it gets cold out, boats go back and they get shrink wrapped and they get put away. So for seasonal shifts, you could start to bid modify aggressively in the areas that are maybe still have their boats in the water, and then slow down bids on areas that are around me where it's just too cold to have your boat in the water at times. So the third point is going to be understand your spend. Now, this is a great quick workflow that I always find myself doing with my clients. And what it is I like to call it follow the money. So from a certain standpoint of a date range, you start at campaign level and you follow your spend, right? So you go from campaign, go down to your ad groups. If there's an ad group that has a lot of spend, go down to keywords. Then really hone in on the search terms report and see what type of queries you're actually spending your money on. And if it's not the best possible traffic you can get, then it absolutely means that there needs to be changes made. Now, just a quick kind of example here, right? So $100 daily budget for one campaign. In Google's eyes, you times it by 30.4, and that's what you're allowed for a monthly spend. If I'm looking at this and I see 3 ad groups, one ad group is spending $2,500 and the bottom ad group is spending 40, you better make sure that that $2,500 ad group is a significantly better and more qualitative ad group than the one that you have that's only getting 40. It's not necessarily the ad group's fault. It may just mean that you have some keywords, like you can see over on the far right, that are just consuming all of that budget away from the others. So you'll see some zeros in here. Those could be great keywords and a completely different concept that you're just trying to get more advertising out of. But if they don't move, or if they get stuck in the wheelhouse where there's a $2,100, sometimes I see broad match keywords or one word modified broad, there may need to make some changes to really adjust how your actual account is going. And a couple of these steps you can really kind of take is taking those underspending ad groups and deciding if they're worth actually being on their own campaign. Because if that top spending ad keyword here, if that actually is very good traffic and you like how it's going, then think about that $40 and $500. It's like, well, if they were on their own campaign, they'd have their own budget to work with, and you'd have a little bit more control over it. If you're in manual bidding, you can of course cheat down the cost per clicks for those high spenders to try to filter it down. Adding negatives always helps pick out the rubbish when you're analyzing the search terms report, trying to understand what type of traffic you're pulling in, adding negatives to prevent junk so that it becomes a little bit more qualitative. Now, the last one, if you decide that you can look at that $2,100 spending keyword and say, wow, this traffic is just junk, right? I'm spending all my money in somewhere that I really don't want it to go, you can pause it. You just have to expect that it's going to take a little while for Google to understand that big change, because there are algorithms on the back end trying to get the money to go where Google's already spending it. So it's definitely not a bad play if you can truly be confident that it's the best decision to make, but you have to give it at least a couple weeks to truly relearn and say, okay, well, you just took away our high spender. What are your other keywords, right? Because we weren't really able to look at them. So let's take a look and see where we can now put that money. So take a step back, really understand where your spend is going, right? Observe a 30, a 90, any type of date range that you feel comfortable understanding, and just kind of break down your budget, see where it's going, and if there needs to be some changes. And you also want to make sure that it is okay to sacrifice some short-term data for long-term results, right? You may see a drop for a couple of weeks if you do make a bigger change, but if you know that you're making that change with confidence and that that change is going to make your account better in the long run, it's well worth it. So in terms of utilizing the search terms report, this is the tool where basically you can go in, you go to search terms report, and it's going to show you the actual queries that people are searching for, how they got triggered by your keywords, and basically get an inside look on how your actual traffic is being spent. So with the recent update, if you're familiar with this at all, Google back last month actually announced that they're going to start limiting how much traffic they're actually going to show us. It's not a very friendly update. It makes things a little bit trickier, but when you think of what they're trying to do, they say it's more for protecting the privacy of some of their users, and it's going to start limiting some of the more insignificant queries. So if you have someone searched something and it was just searched once and it had one impression, one click, you most likely will not see that anymore. And now for me, we normally utilize those one and dones for newer keyword ideas or adding negatives. So it's more important now than ever that they're gone, because you have to make sure that you like the traffic that you're actually seeing in there. And that's what's most important. So whatever they're giving you to look at, you want to make sure that you're liking what you're seeing. You're removing any weeds that you possibly can, which would of course be adding negative keywords, and really getting comfortable with what you're actually seeing in there, and just kind of understanding that, this is something that we're going to continuously see change, so we want to make sure that we're getting the most out of it. In terms of research intent and purchase intent, so this is another big component that I always try to break down within the search terms report. So when you think of looking at your actual traffic, can you look at your queries and say, okay, this is top of funnel, right? So this is more research. So what is, how much does this cost? Well, where can I get this done? Opposed to low funnel purchase driven queries, which is basically going to be, near me or for sale. The ones that, they're already a little bit further down the path of purchasing your product. And if you have a smaller budget, for an example, maybe it is worth trying to shy away from some of those top of funnel queries, because they're just wasting your budget if you can't really get many conversions out of it. But that's why I made that point at the beginning, where conversions are key, because understanding which queries are converting is where you can make these decisions. Because if you don't have that conversion data, you can look at a query and see a bunch of clicks and impressions and think it's not working. But if your conversion tracking is broken, then it could be kind of deceiving for you to make those decisions. So understanding what the user's trying to get out of that search query will go a long way when you're trying to adjust some of your structure of your campaigns. The other component of understanding the search terms report is really looking for some branded terms. If you have a campaign that is more focused on driving your business, new business, rather than pre-existing, it's always worth it to make sure that the branded terms are added as a negative for that campaign. Branded and non-branded work very differently when it comes to cost per clicks, quality score, overall intent. I personally always think that branded should be its own campaign when it's needed, right? If you can thoroughly bank on your SEO and you know that there's no competitors bidding on you, then just focus on non-branded and don't worry about branded until it's needed. But for the most part, they should be broken out, and you should not see branded terms sneaking into your full, the most budget type campaigns. The other component is competitor names. This is something that also may be worth having as a separate campaign, just so you can control the money that way. But if you find that in the query stream you're seeing a bunch of competitor names, check to see if they're even converting. Because the mentality of showing for a competitor may make sense of, oh, we might steal them and get their business. For the most part, 9 out of 10 are going to say, oh, this isn't where I'm trying to go. I'm backing out and finding the person that I was trying to go for. So the conversion data will be important for that, but you definitely want to make sure that where you're seeing your conversions in the query stream or in the search terms report is where you're actually getting the most out of your budget. So if they're limiting our data, you simply want to make it count, right? Just make sure that you're confident that this is what I want to spend on. I don't need any major changes. I don't need to really do much. I like what I'm seeing. Always make sure that the pros of that search terms report outweigh the cons. And if you have to make changes, it's well worth it, because every single day your account will be moving more towards better qualified leads. And these are the steps that you can take to try to get more out of it. So the last point here is going to be really adapting to your business goals. So this point's kind of newer. It definitely has come more about with the COVID situation, of course. Anyone, whether you're a business, just a consumer, anybody on this planet is being affected by the COVID pandemic right now. And what I've actually been seeing with my clients are shifts in their business entirely, right? So if your business is shifting, you shouldn't just sit back and let your paid ads account just keep running as normal. You should make adjustments to actually follow what your account is doing. So a couple examples that I just wanted to kind of explain and kind of run through with you all. I have one client that is a commercial carpet cleaning business, right? So as offices all closed down back in March and April, what essentially happened was all of his clients went away. So what we did was we actually started creating campaigns around residential carpet cleaning. And it was more focused around carpet stretching, area rug cleaning, where you could bring your carpet or they would come pick it up off your driveway, bring it to the warehouse and clean it. And it's been going amazing, right? The return of profit for the sale to lead is outstanding. And it's something that we're most likely just going to continue on doing regardless of, when the commercial clients start to pick back up again. Same thing, I have an awning company that does the same, going from commercial to residential. It's something that's shifting, but if you're not moving your budgets around to follow that, or if breaking out new strategies, then you're just going to get a little bit behind. Renting industrial equipment. I have a client that has a very expensive manufacturing product. It's obviously not something that a lot of companies are willing to pay for right now, with budgeting and everything being tight for a lot of companies. So what our strategy was to create a separate campaign, and we focused on rental. And it became so popular that we actually started to move all of our budget over to rental, which was allowing companies to bring in this equipment that they needed, but on a rental basis. And what it does is it brings my client more profit, and it also gets their product through a new business door, where once they're ready, or once the rental's over, they're most likely going to be ready to just purchase it outright. And it's already a strong relationship starting. And the last one is dentists. This one always kind of has me laughing, but we have seen a few dentists of ours where, funny enough, when everyone started going on to Zoom meetings, they were starting to notice themselves a little bit more. So you'd sign up for a Zoom, the camera would be staring you in the face, and you'd see that your teeth are a little bit yellower than you thought, or a little bit more crooked than you had imagined. And while dentist office was shut down, what we started doing was we started a scheduling system for a campaign where people could schedule a teeth whitening or an alignment type appointment down the road once things are reopening. Because just like anything else, if any of you had, doctor's appointments, anything, they're all kind of getting pushed out and a little bit delayed. So making sure that clients were able to schedule when things were seemingly okay allowed for their book of business to be ready to go and rolling, rather than starting when it actually picks back up. So just a couple examples here of actually shifting the strategy, not only to the pandemic, but to the actual campaigns. Because if you continuously just kind of leave it where you are going to fall behind a little bit. So putting your budget where your current business is always going to be useful, because if you continuously wait for that, commercial or in-office type components to keep on going, we don't know when this is ending, right? Nobody does. And as we see things slowly reopen, it doesn't mean it's going to slow back down. So start to think about these ideas and where you can take your account and shift it into newer ideas, newer models, and it's temporary, right? I mean, if it means that, for a couple months you have to move your budgets around, that's perfectly okay. It doesn't necessarily mean that what you're doing is permanent. So for the next couple months, think about where you can make some of these shifts, and then over time you can always move your budgets back, right? Google's done a very good job in learning and adapting to what your budgets are and how to spend them. And if it means there's going to be a week or so of kind of figuring that out, it helps in the long run. And it's just well worth it to really consider some of these as important takeaways for your business itself. So that's how I had for my 5 tips. I definitely would like to hear what we have for some questions and see, if this was helpful.
Awesome, Michael. Thank you so much. You gave us a lot to think about. Guys, if you're feeling inspired or maybe even a little overwhelmed and want to talk to one of our experts, I'm about to show a pop-up on your screen for a free digital marketing consultation so we can see how we can help your business. So I will launch that for you guys. and then we can get to the Q&A. So Michael, our first question is from Shannon. She asks, if your campaign has been up only a month with the conversion tracking, how long before you should change to automated bid by conversion?
Yeah, and that's a good question. When you think of automated bid strategies, depending on what the goal is, and if the goal is conversions, you're eventually going to be asking Google, hey, get me conversions, but based off of my historical conversions. So realistically, the best practice is to wait until you see 10 to 15 conversions on a 30-day basis. Depending on how your first 30 days have gone, you're still in learning mode. So you definitely don't want to push it too quick. I would realistically wait at least another month and see if you have some decent conversions going in order to make that shift. Because with max conversions, Google completely changes their algorithms to go after conversions. You can't control your cost per clicks. So if you have a $60 daily budget right now, you could start seeing some $60, $70 cost per clicks, which is something that you may not want. So there's definitely different components to each automated bid strategy, but I would at least wait until you have some historical data for Google to go off of so that you know that they're able to try to obtain what you're asking for, if that makes sense.
Awesome. We have another question from Mindy. She says, I don't have goals set up for the campaigns I'm running. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what the goals are trying to accomplish, and it's one of the components that Google will try to help you through the creation of your campaigns. They're trying to lean you more towards which bidding strategy would be right to achieve your goal. So personally, when I'm creating campaigns, I don't pick a goal either, because all it's doing is, if my goal is traffic, for an example, it's not going to give me the ability to put in maximize conversions or some of those other bid strategies. It's just going to try to get me as much traffic as possible, which would potentially be, maximize clicks or target impression share. So setting up a campaign without a goal is not necessarily a bad thing. It's more around if you need the assistance to figure out what will work best for you in order to achieve your goal. But understanding internally what your goal is, you can do so and create that campaign without goals and be perfectly fine. You just want to, of course, make sure that your conversion tracking is accurate so that the goals that you're actually trying to accomplish are being tracked and you're able to optimize those.
That's great. Thank you. Here's another question. This one is from Gregory. Any recommendations for making the most of a small startup budget? It's difficult to make decisions when you don't have historical data.
Yes, and when you have a smaller budget, the best recommendation I can give you is small account. There's indefinite times that I'll have a client where they'll have a very small budget, but then we'll go into their account and they'll have 5 ad groups that are all different services, 20, 30, 40 keywords. When you have a small budget, the best thing you can do is pick the service that's most important to you, have one ad group, depending on how small it is, maybe 1 or 2, and just really try to drive home that where your budget is going is the best opportunity for your business, rather than trying to spread it too thin with multiple initiatives. Because unless you're trying to increase that budget, the multiple initiatives just don't necessarily make sense for what you're trying to do.
Awesome. And then here is a question from Juan. As far as search term report changes, does it make sense to only build single keyword ad groups versus theme-based?
So the single keyword ad groups, so SCAGs, it can work. I still don't necessarily feel that it's a best practice because there's so much limitations to what your ads can show for, right? So when you have single theme ad groups, you're able to have multiple keywords so that Google does have multiple options to ensure that you're getting the traffic that you're after. If you have a single keyword, the trickiest part about a single keyword with the search terms report update is that if it's insignificant or if it's just basically the same exact query, you're not going to see any traffic at all, which makes it even harder. So it's almost kind of the opposite right now, where you'd rather have single themed ad groups with multiple keywords that can generate some traffic so that the actual search terms report can populate data for you to understand, analyze, and truly optimize on.
Great. Here is a question from Katie. She asks, is there a specific type of keyword match that you always start with? Is it better to start with exact match and build from there?
So normally I like to start with modified broad and some phrase depending on what that term is. When you think of the difference between modified broad and phrase, modified broad can get reconfigured. You can add words in between, you can be different order compared to phrase where it's in that order, but it at least pulls in the different sides, right? So roofing company on phrase could pull in roofing companies near me, local roofing company. Modify broad, it could be companies that do roofing or companies that can help clean my roof, whatever it may be. The value in starting with a little bit more open-ended traffic is being able to understand the data and seeing the search terms report to begin with so that you feel more comfortable with what you're seeing. Because if you start with exact match, if that keyword doesn't have a lot of search volume, or if you don't really have the right cost per click for that particular market, it may start off very slow, and it'd be frustrating to not really see much happening with it, rather than modify broad where it can pull out some new keyword ideas to go into that single ad theme group, and just kind of try to actually get your account up and running and allow for some data to pull in with Google and try to get a little bit more familiar with your account.
Great. And here is our last question. This one's from Eric. How do I know if conversion tracking is accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of conversion tracking, I normally use a Chrome extension called Tag Assistant. When you're using conversion tracking, there's a lot of different components, and I definitely can't say I'm an expert. Our team, we actually have a team of experts that help with all of your conversion tracking and all of that, and I just heavily rely on them to make sure that they're digging in and making sure. But you use a Google Tag Assistant or Analytics, whatever your choice is for tracking, and if it's implemented correctly, you should be able to go to that final completion page. So if you have a thank you page after the form that you're trying to get them to complete, using Tag Assistant, which is a Google Chrome extension, you'll be able to see which tags are present. And if the conversion tag is, Google conversion tag, for an example, you go to that thank you page and you go to Tag Assistant and you can see that that tag is there, then you know it's working accurately. Outside of that, you can go to the conversions tab within Google Ads and hover over and see when the last conversion occurred. And if that's accurate with what you've been seeing on your business side, then you'll know if there's an issue or not. And that's something that we could always kind of follow up with a little bit more in depth as well, with the follow-up email as well.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much, guys. We had a lot of great questions. If we didn't get to your question here, we'll be sure to follow up with you and connect you with an expert to get those answers as well as we can. And thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.